Hello and welcome to another episode of the D.A.R.E podcast, which has been powered by City AM. I'm the host and the producer, Miranda Brawn, and we have a fantastic guest today who's also a dear friend of many, many years. Her name is newly Dr. Vanessa Vallely OBE. Let's give her a round of applause. Woo! Thank you. So Vanessa, I also want to say, for those that don't know, Vanessa is the CEO of an organisation called WeAreTheCity, but she's also a Pearly Queen for the City of London. Among so many things, she's a board advisor for Cancer Research UK, Women of Influence, where we're both on the board there, and many, many other things. She is just a legend in the city. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today, Vanessa.
You.
And I know we've not seen each other for about 5 years. So this is the first time we're actually physically connecting. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the D.A.R.E podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about you being a Pearly Queen of the City of London, because so many people watching this will probably be thinking, what is this? And I know this has been with your family for over 100 years. So why don't you explain what is a Pearly Queen and how long have you been a Pearly Queen?
Oh my God. So I've been Pearly Kings and Queens have been in my family for over 100 years. So it was started by an orphan boy in 1875, a young boy called Henry Croft, who was a Barnardo's boy. And he used to work in the markets of London, so no Tesco's in those days. Things like Billingsgate, Smithfield, and he was a rat catcher. But he also used to collect
He was
money.
a rat catcher?
Yeah, because obviously, back in those days, all that food and everything else around. Cities still like it, right? Let's not make no bones about it. We just don't see it as much. But so he was a rat catcher there. But he also used to raise money for charity. So he used to collect money for costers that were down on their luck. So costers being costermongers, so apple sellers. So for example, if they went out of work or they were ill, they couldn't support their families, so he would raise money for them. But he also raised money for a number of different charities, not to mention, obviously, Barnardo's as well. So to kind of make himself stand out in the market, he sewed real mother of pearl buttons on his suit, and he took that from the costermongers, who were known as flash boys, who sewed penny-size buttons down the sides of their lapels here and down the sides of their trousers. So he made himself a button suit so that he would stand out in the market, so that he could collect money for charity. And eventually he got very well known and he got very busy, and he realised that he couldn't service all the markets that were across London. So he made a Pearly King and Queen, no gender split there, to all of the different 28 boroughs of London, which is how London used to be divided. So somewhere in the 1930s, might have been 1935, my granddad became a Pearly King. And he was given the City of London, and his brother the City of Westminster. So like all good Pearly families do, with his 10 children, he made each of the children, namely my dad, Pearly Kings or Pearly Queens of different parts of East London. So most of my family are Clapton, Haggerston, all of that kind of way, Shoreditch, Hoxton, all of that kind of way of the world. And their job was to raise money in their button suits, which we make ourselves, for that particular borough. So my granddad raised thousands and thousands of pounds and travelled to countries to be, an ambassador for the UK over the years. And as he got older, he obviously couldn't do it anymore. So he handed the title of City of London down to my dad, who subsequently went on and raised loads and loads of money. I was promoted to Queen of Hoxton, Pearly Queen of Hoxton. And then my father couldn't do Pearly buttons anymore, so he stepped down and he gave me the title of City of London about 7 years ago. So I'm the Queen of City of London, and my husband, you inherited the title, so he's the King.
He must love that.
Yeah, he does. He's a proper Pearly King. He's really good. But the kids, they're too cool to wear Pearly buttons. They'd be like, no. They did when they were little, but I could control them, but not anymore. But it's a wonderful part of London's history, and there are many different Pearly families. There's lots of members of my family that are still active. They're out there every single week raising money for charity. I put my buttons on when I can. You might have seen a lot of Pearly Kings in the opening ceremony of the London Olympics. That was all my family. And I had a special suit made. And the only thing is, you have to make your suit. So when COVID came along, and I think we all got a little bit wider during that during that time, it was a bit of a struggle to get my suit on. But, if I'm called to do something, I've raised money for Barts in the past, Maggie's Centres, and stuff like that. So I'm called to do something, I will put my button suit on and I will be there. But people should look out for the Harvest Festival. One happens at St Martin's in the Fields, where my actual parents had a big Pearly wedding many years ago, and one also happens at the City of London at Guildhall around about the same time. So look out for the Pearly Kings. You can also find them in Covent Garden as well.
There you go. So if anyone needs to know about this, they need to listen to this podcast.
That's where they go.
To learn more about Pearly Kings and Queens.
Have a Google.
This is terrific stuff. So you started life. Let's go back all the way back to the beginning, your childhood.
Okay.
Started in Hackney.
Dalston.
Very
trendy now.
Very trendy now. Very expensive. It's becoming like, the Notting Hills about 10, 20 years ago. So tell me about that. What was life growing up in Hackney? Because your story is really interesting, because before you launched We Are the City, you actually had a banking career for 25 years.
Yeah, I did. I think the city's entrenched in me, to be honest. I've lived on the corner of the city all my life. I ended up having my corporate career here. We Are the City was started in that square mile, and obviously, it's grown out UK and globally. But growing up, I grew up in Dalston. I spent some time in Hoxton as well. Just me and my mum. Like, Dad was in my life and stuff like that. So a lot of love, but we never really had much in terms of, material things. But we had a great passion, I think, as a kind of united unit to, make the best of kind of what we had. So I went to school and I actually went back to my school to do a sixth formers leavers party last week.
Which school did you go to?
Haggerston, just on the corner of Bethnal Green. But, I didn't do very well in school, if I'm honest. There were other things kind of going on in life at the time. And I kind of got my head down about the last year of school, thanks to two teachers who told me that I would amount to nothing unless I kind of got an education. And that, it was tough love, but it was needed. So I kind of skirted out of school with a few GCSEs and went up to the city. I could see the city from my bedroom window. I could see NatWest Tower. And that was the only tall building at the time. I'm really showing my age here.
But I remember you shared that in your book.
Yeah,
so you're also an author.
Yeah.
So you've shared your whole story.
That was 10 years ago. But I mean, it's still relevant, but I desperately need to write another one, but that's on the cards next year. So went up, got a job in the city, went to work at NatWest. That was the first kind of job in banking. Dipped out of there into technology. Bear in mind, the city wasn't even using computers. No one knew how to kind of turn one on. So I had a skill. The one thing I did learn in school was how to turn a computer on. So worked for a company. They were shifting kit into the city, teaching people how to use, DOS-based products. Windows was just coming in. And I kind of latched onto that. And then I skipped through different kind of training careers, taught myself various applications, run my own business at 21, jumped back into corporate, met my husband along the way, climbed the ladder, I think, in corporate by always kind of putting my hands up for opportunities, even when even deep down when I thought I couldn't do what they was asking me to do. I just had this kind of, I've got nothing to lose. I'm just going to give it a go.
I think that's a good success tip, because one of the things I was going to ask is, what success tips do you have? And I think that's a really good one.
Yeah, definitely around, there were times when I was like, oh my God, what have I signed up for? But I kind of felt the fear and did it anyway. So jumped through numerous different jobs. I mean, that was a strategy. I would stay somewhere 2 or 3 years while I was young, also increased my salary quite a lot by doing so. I took a few interim roles.
That's what I did, though.
Yeah.
And you do get that promotion and you do get that pay rise really quickly. And I think also when you're starting banking, like you, I also came from East London, Leytonstone. And when you start, I was 18. Were you 16 when you started?
16,
and I was 18 when I started. We're still, you're teenagers. Yeah. And I think sometimes I spent my 20s actually figuring out which part of banking do I want to be in. So I would, every few years change banks. And I think that's probably a normal thing to do now, but back then it was in certain times
I think there was this kind of thing, and again, you don't see it, and nowadays, you had to do a certain tenure at each company before you jumped, otherwise it looked like, you was just jumping around. But
it was a job for life. It was like, you've been with that bank for 2 years, well, how do we know you're not going to stick around here?
Exactly.
Whereas I think now it's expected for growth.
But I think also firms have got a lot better at internal mobility programs.
Yes.
So you're not stuck in one job for life, you can jump around. And I was lucky enough to work for a number of bosses that used me as a troubleshooter, dropped me into a department, fix the processes, work with the individuals within that department, and then disappear and then go into a next department. So I really like that. I like the variety of that. So, roles like global head of business management, like chief of staff kind of roles, COO, one of the CEOs over Barclays for technology transformation. So very much kind of banking and tech. but kind of came up a different route, an unconventional route. But I say very much so, kind of putting myself in front of people, going, give me an opportunity, I won't let you down. And kind of then telling myself that every single night, you can't let people down. But it worked, right? And then I kind of got to that point where I was in a senior leadership position and just kept looking around the room saying, why am I the only woman here? Like, where are the women? And how do I get the women that work for me into this room?
And people of colour. I was in the same position where I was the only woman and the only person of colour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. There was no development programs there. I mean, bear in mind, this was 2008 when I set up WeAreTheCity. And there was nothing. I mean, that was financial crisis, right? We were lucky if we had plants, let alone training courses or, anything to do with us progressing. So, and that was the kind of where WeAreTheCity began, because it was like, okay, if I'm sitting here feeling like this, wanting access to resources, wanting access to networks, wanting to be around other senior women, there must be other women that feel the same. But also, in equal measure, there's women in the middle, which is very much my sweet spot, where life gets really tough, where you're not earning enough to get the support system that you need. You're sitting behind someone waiting to get promoted who's not leaving because they're waiting for their pension. You might be juggling kids, parental, responsibilities, or, God forbid it, you might actually have a hobby that you want to do outside of work. So that's kind of where I decided it's, okay, how do I help that middle layer get to where they need to be? And bear in mind, there was not many women's networks. They were entrepreneurial, they were very senior. And then 2010 came along, and what you saw was this huge explosion of women's networks off the back of we need more women on boards by Lord Davis, and lots of people realising, actually, we're stronger together. Let's create these little women's networks for all the different industries that exist. And now, I mean, we know of at least 1,000 across the UK, women's networks in different industries, but safe spaces for women to grow, connect, and learn. And I think that's definitely progress.
And you got access to 120,000 members on WeAreTheCity?
Yeah, about 80,000.
Okay.
And then we've got about 70,000 on social media as well. So we've grown really organically. And I think when I started, I was running off the side of my desk. So for 7 years, we built a community. We never was trying to sell anyone anything. It was like, look, if you're looking for a network, this one's amazing. Or listen to this woman's story. She's incredible. So it was all about motivation, inspiration, not can we sell you something? So, and I think, and we still don't really hard sell, even today. And we're very kind of, you want to join up to WeAreTheCity, you sign up, you get a newsletter telling you what's going on. If you want to dip in, come to one of our events, nominate yourself for one of our awards, attend one of our conferences, you can. But we're not married, right? So if you want to go off and benefit from all these other different networks, we're going to tell you where they are. So I think it's a kind of, a Nanny McPhee model, if you like, if anyone's seen that film. It's like, as and when you need us, you can kind of tune in. So, so it's grown massively. I mean, I think we've got something in the region of 2,200 award winners, Rising Stars, Tech Women, Pioneer 20, which I recently did with Visa, which are refugee women in business. They're incredible. Thrive 20, they're sustainable impact entrepreneurs. So, these lists of women, I suppose I'm in the business of creating communities, that's the first thing, but also shining a spotlight on women and providing opportunities for them to network and upskill however they see fit.
I think that's wonderful. And I know we met a few years after you had launched. And it's funny because I think one of the great things that WeAreTheCity, what you actually do is you actually bring together lots of women's networks. Because I think for me, I first started getting involved in women's networks, Deutsche Bank, in the 1999s, 2000s.
Yep.
So I think one of the great things that your organisation has done is actually take it to another level and actually help to collaborate with lots of the institutions and the organisations that are focused on gender diversity.
Yeah, and it's not just those women that have set up networks to address a certain industry or a certain profession, but we also run gender networks. So gender networks brings together the chairs and the co-chairs of the employee relations groups within 60 different firms. So we bring them together to share best practice, because that's how we get ahead. By, it's pointless trying to keep reinvent the wheel. We all want the same outcome.
You've got to come together.
Which is gender equity for women.
Yeah.
We can't solve things like, big societal issues like, education and poverty or violence against women and girls. But what we can do is we can make the workplace, a slightly better place, but with our efforts. So, it's small on the grand scheme of, as I say, gender equity, gender parity, but by the same token, there's a lot of women working in corporate. We've kind of achieved percentage numbers in terms of women on boards, but that number's fragile if we don't build a pipeline of women that can step into their shoes.
Let's talk about imposter syndrome, because
Oh, yes.
You shared with me today, I think it's exclusive. So we're recording on the 9th of July 2024, and we always record a few months in advance. So this will go live potentially the end of the year-ish, autumn period. And so you have shared that you are a doctorate, an honorary doctorate.
I will be next week. Yes, absolutely.
Which is amazing. And you've also got an OBE for all
Yep.
your services to gender diversity and equality. And yet you still have imposter syndrome. And there are so many women like Michelle Obama, so many successful women who are on the top of their game. And yet, I mean, I don't have imposter syndrome anymore. I used to have it years ago when I very first started. But I've learned through tools and techniques how to manage that. I don't have it, but yet you have it today. And how do you manage that? Or do you just accept that you've got imposter syndrome? When you're in a space and you're thinking, hold on, what am I doing here? Because you did share before the recording, you know, the fact that you left school, you don't have a degree, minimum qualifications, and now you've got an honorary doctorate. So how do you handle imposter syndrome?
Well, I mean, it's ironic,
to get
right?
all this success.
Considering I'm a public speaker and I talk to women about imposter syndrome, because I too have learnt lots of strategies, but I wouldn't necessarily, you know, I'd love to get rid of the word syndrome because it's not something you permanently have. I have imposter moments, and a lot of mine is to do with, as I say, that lack of education. So
I love
when
that, imposter moments.
Exactly. And someone gave that to me, and I should credit them, and I can't think who it was, but it is moments in time where it's like that little voice in your head says to you, do you deserve to be here? Are you good enough? Can you contribute towards that conversation? It's just these little voices, and I've learned how to turn them off and recollect in my mind, actually, here's all the things that you have done that you should be proud of. But it still creeps in. You know, for me, it's when I'm in a room with very, very educated people, you know, or people that speak exceptionally well. You know, my East End accent is there. I mean, it's probably refined over the years, but put me back in the East End. Like I was at London Fields last week, it comes back in droves. But I think, you know, I think, and also I don't think it's a bad thing because it keeps you a little bit humble. Like, so just having that strategy around actually, as I say, recollecting some of the things that you've done and how you did get here, and also understanding that we all come at things from different perspectives. So my perspective is going to be completely different from someone who is highly educated, who's come from, say, a more privileged background or stuff. So I do have a contribution in that room. It's just a different way of thinking. So, but yeah, absolutely. I'd be a lie to say I get it. It's funny, I don't, like when I step onto a stage, there can be 1,000 people in the room and it's not there. It's just certain times where I'm like, oh, I notice my heart beating a little bit faster and stuff like that. And again, an internal conversation myself calms that down.
So this is a Successful Mindset podcast with a focus on leadership. And I highlight successful mindset tips, whether it's visualization, vision boards, affirmations. Do you do any of those, Vanessa, to help?
I used to do a mood board. I do, coming out of corporate, right, I think we're so entrenched in having a mid-year and an end of year. So I do give myself a mid-year and an end of year.
Very good.
I'm probably my toughest critic. I never get the 4s, you know, like the highest scores that you used to get.
You should.
No, I do. Sometimes I do. But you have to, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm on a journey. I want to see more women in technology. That's a woeful, pitiful number. I want to see more women, you know, making it through to the upper ranks so they're ready for those board decision-making, you know, roles. So for me, I have to have a set of goals and I have to have, you know, an overall strategy of what I want to achieve. So I think having that mid-year, you know, of keeping myself on track around what it is I'm trying to achieve. And moreover, you know, my story is not my story because there are so many people around me that have helped me to do those awards, to do those conferences, to do, when I have an idea, they help me grow it. So I think that is more for me rather than the kind of affirmation stuff. I read a lot of it on Instagram. I read yours. So I read a lot of them. But, you know, mood boards, having a proper strategic plan around where I want to go and what I need to do. And also having that, it stops me going off in terms of, you know, I like shiny things. I'm a bit like a magpie. And I'm like, oh, I want to go over there. I want to see that. You know, I know my ADHD has a little bit to do with that as well.
Do you have ADHD?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
When were you?
When I was 50.
There are so many women, older women, who are being diagnosed with that.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
So I know I've got a tendency to flip and I've always done it all my
Yeah.
life. Flip in and out of things and go, oh, that's really interesting. No, I'm bored. I'm going over there. So kind of having that.
I wonder if I've got it, because I'm a bit like that.
I can tell you where to go. So having that kind of plan also makes me be able to see is why am I spending so much time on that when it's not contributing to my overall strategy.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, if it fills my heart with joy and it's something I want to do, then 100%. But if I've got some big old targets that I need to achieve by the end of the year, which, you know, in my world is getting tougher, this whole conversation around, you know, D&I and, you know, not necessarily being, we need to rethink it, you know, is tough on businesses like mine. So I need to be very structured in my approach and I need to be, you know, very open to how we pivot and how we survive in this kind of new world. So, you know, I think for me, not having those, that for me is the positive mindset to look at my plan and go, where am I going? What do I need to do? Who needs to help me? And, you know, making sure that I'm spending time on the right things.
Yeah, and just taking it to the next level. You know, you've developed this amazing platform. So you might know, because I know we haven't seen each other for a while, but I was a senior visiting fellow at Oxford University.
Saw that.
So the research, we're finalising that, the Brawn review on boardroom sustainability, corporate
Excellent.
governance and inclusion. And one of the questions I ask most of our guests is, you know, we've touched upon diversity and the importance of gender diversity in technology,
Yeah.
but across the whole board, what more do you think we could be doing to make the boardroom more sustainable and more inclusive?
I think we need a total rethink of how we do things. You know, even I was talking to someone the other day and I was saying, even the things that we do, like now at We Are the City, they were fit for purpose 10 years ago. And some of them will live, you know, and some of them may need change. So I think the whole thing needs to be revisited. And I think if you look at that climb around board diversity, you know, from when Helena Morrissey first started the 30% Club and I think it was like 11% or something like that. It was a really, really low percentage number.
And we've got Pavita Cooper coming on later.
Amazing, Pavita, big fan. And to where we are now, I think what we could do with doing is stopping going, okay, what are the lessons learned over the last 10 years? What are the best bits we can take from that journey? What is now going to be workable in the new world so that we can make that pathway easier in the future? You know, we still don't have the rich diversity that we need within those board level women. We've got a way to go around there. So I think we need to do some more work there. And again, I mean, the likes of the 30% Club and other wonderful women on boards, you know, all these other amazing organisations are doing a lot more over the last kind of few years to say, okay, what is that next level down? What does that look like? You know, what does, you know, how do we build that pipeline so we have that sustainability of women on boards and making sure that those women are from diverse backgrounds, because that's the richness that we all aspire to. So I think a little stop would be a good idea and go, okay, what great lessons can we take from there and what are the things we shouldn't be doing?
And I think also, I totally agree with all of that, but I think the onus also needs to be on the white middle-class males. And my career has been because a white middle-class male has believed in me, hired me, promoted me, mentored me, coached me, and so on and so on. And I think sometimes they get the bad end of the stick or whatever that terminology is.
Yeah.
But I think when we say we've got to do more of this and
not women.
I think it's not women. I think, you know, you can't say to women, you've got to dream bigger, you've got to, like, the men have to help us. I think it's so important to have male allies, to speak up in the workplace, to actually encourage more women, sponsor more women to have these positions. Otherwise, we're going to just be on a hamster wheel, going round and round in circles.
I agree. I think, you know, we're all on the journey together. Like,
Yeah.
you can't just say it's for we you know, it's not about fixing the women, right? We're not something that's here to fix. We need that allyship. Both of us need to be at the seat at the table to work out what that looks like. Now, I'm the same as you. My career was fueled by a number of amazing, incredible men that gave me opportunities. And why were they men? Because there wasn't no women at the top.
Although when there were a few women, I've had one or two that were helpful, but there were a few who were
queen bees.
You know, very terrible, quite honestly. You know, very jealous, very possessive, very much like, oh, here's the younger, pretty girl coming up the ranks. And they weren't supportive at all. I think the industry now and the workplace now has got more women who are more secure within themselves and more helpful to our next generation of women.
I would agree with that. And I think there's more of a system
But a lot of the
women
problems I faced were with women as opposed to men. And I think it was down to jealousy and insecurity.
I mostly work with men, but back to your point around kind of, you know, the allyship. Men want to help women.
Yeah.
I don't believe that they don't. I don't think there's some big kind of campaign, let's not get women to the top. But you have to look at a number of different things, right? So firstly, what does that good sponsorship look like? So explaining to somebody that if you're a quiet voice in a room, clearing space for that voice to be heard is an act of allyship. You know, stopping the microaggressions that sometimes go on, you know, in meeting rooms, and, you know, stopping ideas being stolen from others. So all of these small little things, the sponsorship, putting a woman's name in a hat for an opportunity when no one else is speaking up about how incredible she is. So these tiny little things, carving out time to talk to women about their achievements and what they're doing, and then not just listening, but taking that away, going, okay, what do I do with that? Where are the opportunities? So I think it's not that men don't want to help. Sometimes they don't necessarily always know what good looks like. And it's not, let's teach men to suck eggs. It's more a case of, okay, here are some of the things that I face on a daily basis. How do you help take some of those barriers away? You know, what can you do in your perhaps position of privilege where you're in a room that I'm not in that could raise my profile in some way? You know, how do you kind of understand that, like, what it's like for me when I'm trying to kind of, articulate an idea, or it is I want that next promotion and I need to spend a bit of time with someone to understand what that looks like, and what skills I should be aspiring to. I think, sometimes it's time, Miranda. It's not that people don't want to help. We're all so busy keeping our head down and doing our own thing that sometimes we forget to stop and look around us and go, who needs a hand here? So, and that also, I think, men can do the work. There's so many books out there that you can read around allyship. There's podcasts. There's some amazing champions on LinkedIn, the likes of Danielle from Ducker, Lee Chambers, Elliot Ray, that are really out there championing. And they've got some really great content as well that, even makes, I read it as a woman and I'm like, oh my God, that's gold, for somebody to read. So I think we definitely all need to be on the journey, and it's not a finger pointing exercise at all.
I think that's key, the fact that this is not a finger-pointing exercise. But I know pre-COVID, when I would go to networking events and it would be, a mature white male in the room, and he would come up to me and challenge me and be like, I don't believe in diversity and we don't really need it. And, it's like, oh my God, I'm trying to network here and have a easygoing evening. And now I've got to stand up for diversity. But I think when we talk about gender diversity, we've also got to be mindful that it's not just white women who have benefited from this. It's the intersexual, there's the women of colour who, we need to think about that. There's the LGBTQ, sexual orientation, there's the religion, the age.
Yeah.
There's so many different aspects that we've also got to look at. And I think when we look at gender diversity, I know with certain women's networks, I would say to them, but the focus seems to be just on white women. We need to focus on women of colour. And it used to be, I'm not really of colour, so maybe it's something that, people of colour need to focus on.
That's a very naive view. I mean, when we started, there was no financial thing, for people to join We Are the City. We didn't care who you were, where you came from, what your background was, just come to us and we'll help you. Yeah. And we built a very, very diverse community off the back of that. So D&I isn't new to us. We started like that 15 years ago. So it is important that we have, for the different marginalised groups, for those that don't have the privilege that comes of that when I walk in a room, naturally that I get given because of the colour of my skin. There are focus areas that we need to do, and there's some incredible individuals doing work in that space, But I think, making sure that your organisation is open and inclusive from the get-go. And for us, that means, who we put on our website pages, that so people see their own role models, who I put on my stages, who judges our awards, all of those things mean something, Even if I go into a room and I listen to a woman and she's got like a wide Cockney accent, and he said, already I'm like, oh my God, she's me, So we need that role modelling, I think, across whatever it is that we're doing, and that goes for corporates as well. Telling the stories of your women, and again that intersectional lens. We're not just women, I think, I look at myself, and I'm, all right, I'm a white heterosexual woman, but I have a hidden disability. I have ADHD. I have, various other bits and pieces along social mobility, right? So I have different facets to me. So, but you wouldn't know that, So how do you ensure that I feel included when I've got all of these other things that perhaps I don't want to shout about or anything like that? So I think we have to do the work, Miranda. That's what I'm saying. So just on the assumption that people in that room are not just one type of person, that we all identify in different ways, and whatever we can do to make those people feel included, I think that should be, you know, part of what we do, just being a human being in society.
Well said, Vanessa, well said. And I think the belonging aspects, we've got the D, E and I, but I think the B is really starting to rise to the top.
Yep.
Because once you've got the diversity, once you've got the inclusion aspect, I think belonging is definitely something that's going to be key for organisations to change the culture, because culture change is going to be key for that. We're coming to the end. It's gone
Just
so
on
quick.
that point, you don't
Yeah.
get the diversity without the inclusion.
No, you need the
Right?
inclusion.
So you have to
Yeah.
start there first. And belonging, right?
And the equity, you know.
But these
that's the key
companies
piece.
are big machines. You're talking about moving huge oil tankers, some of which have been around for hundreds of years, and that culture is entrenched. So no amount of D&I head or program for this marginalised group or that is going to change that. This is why we need to think another way. So
It starts in the boardroom. I sit in
100%.
various boardrooms across lots of different industries. And in order for the culture to change, you need to have a diverse boardroom, which is why the Brawn review is there, so that it can filter down.
Yeah,
because
but
it
also
starts
you
from
need
the
to
top.
address the middle layer.
You need to
Because
address the
that's
middle
where
layer.
That's
yes.
where it gets stuck. So
Yeah.
the boards get it.
Yeah.
The youngsters get it.
But some boards get it.
Sometimes
but
in the middle.
But some boards aren't diverse enough to get it.
Yeah.
And they give lip service. So you've got to make sure that you have true diversity right at the top, and then it comes all the way through the middle and then all the way down
And
the
how
bottom.
do we do that? From a gender perspective, we grow the pipeline.
Yes.
We help the women in the middle.
Yeah, yeah. And also we help the next generation of those who come from East London and all over, you know.
Absolutely.
What's the best and worst advice you've been given?
Best advice, I think don't ever change who you are.
Yeah.
You know, be your authentic self. I mean, when I first started in the city, I tried to hide who I was, you know. God, even admitting it now, elocution lessons and everything like that. Tried to polish myself up to be what and who for what. You know, to be my authentic self. I've never been happier since. I just am who I am. And if that's a big-haired, curly girl, you know, but that doesn't pronounce her H's properly, then that's who I am. Take it or leave it.
Curly hair,
We're both rocking the curly hair
rock.
today. I think that is the kind of best advice, being your authentic self. But I needed to become more senior to be like that.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, we can form a lot on that kind of journey.
I think success builds confidence within yourself to help you be who you are. Because I also tried to conform when I first started banking, with all the suits, the
suits and
corporate.
everything. Exactly.
But I was always myself, though. I was always very smiley, personality, laughing, joking, you know. But there were periods where I was very quiet because I was told, keep your mouth shut, put your head down. But then you realise, actually, if I put my head down and keep my mouth shut, you miss out on opportunities.
Yeah.
You know? So it's finding that healthy balance, I think.
And there is also that uncomfortableness that comes with putting your hand up for things, you know. And also it's so easily, we're so easily labelled as women, or she's a bit bolshy, or she's a bit bold, or
a bit pushy.
And,
you know.
and I think those labels were more prevalent perhaps back in our early days, but they were still, you didn't want that label. So you're right, sometimes you did pipe down and you didn't speak up and stuff like that. So I think that's the best advice. What's the worst advice I've been given? Oh my God, that's a tough one.
There's so many.
No, do you know something? It's not even so much there's so many, but now I look back and I think, at the time I might have thought they were bad. It was bad advice, you know. Like, again, back to our point a moment ago. You know, don't stick your head above the parapet. Just keep your head down. Like, you know, don't make sure that you're not visible to these particular individuals or stuff like that. And when I look back now, so for example, don't go and work on a trading floor because you won't survive there and stuff like that. And I should have just done what I wanted to do, and I should have taken my brand of Vanessa onto that trading floor. So things like that, little nuggets that people planted in my ear as tiny little seeds, and I grew them into massive big trees that probably prevented me from doing some of the things that I should have done. So yeah, maybe listening to other people a little bit too much in the early days.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the advice I was given, or not even advice, it was a statement. I was like 21, 22, 23. And at that point, I developed a voice because I'd been, you know, working in banking for a good 4 or 5 years at this point, and I'd worked for really good banks. But I was told that I was too nice to survive banking. They were like, "You're too lovely."
Yeah.
you know, this industry is going to eat you up. 30 years on.
Still here.
I did all right. So
nothing wrong
it
with
goes to
being
show,
nice.
there's nothing wrong with it, but I think it goes to show that I think back then investment banking was very much a cutthroat, aggressive trading floor. I mean, I remember being 20 years old and there was this trader who everyone was scared of. He would swear, throw phones. It was in the days where you could smoke at your desk after 6 o'clock. It was that environment.
And the drinks trolley would come round.
Yes. And one day he decided to swear at me, and the East London in me came out, you know, in a very professional, assertive way. But I corrected him and I said to him, I talk to you with respect. You are not going to talk to me like that again. And it's funny because as a 20-year-old on the trading floor for a very big investment bank, everyone was like, oh my God, there were big grown men who were decades older than me that couldn't do what I just did.
Yeah.
That got his respect and everyone else's respect. I think that slowly developed a reputation where I was someone that had a voice, and no matter how young I was not going to put up with any nonsense. And I think one of the things, you know, where the original ex-boss of mine saying that I was too nice, I think, like you say, it's good to be nice.
Yeah.
You know, just
Nothing wrong
don't
with
be
being
taken
nice.
advantage of.
Be kind, exactly. Speak up, obviously, when you can in situations like that. Get the support of others if you don't feel comfortable enough to do so.
Yeah.
I think the world has changed. I think what we've seen over the course of the last 10 to kind of 12 years is respect in the workplace, and there'll be things that will not be tolerated. And I think, you know, although we're a million steps back on a lot of other things, I think that's made the working world a much nicer place to be in.
Yeah, definitely. So what's next for you, personally or professionally?
What's next?
I know
Well,
you just come back from Spain, you're glowing with your tan.
I try and kind of spend a lot of time, I kind of divide my time between the UK and Spain. Something, again, was on the wish list when I was 15.
Yeah.
So what's next for me? I've got a number of different, I've got my Tech Women 100 awards coming up, and there'll be 950 of them. We've been running the awards for kind of 9 years, so I'm excited to celebrate them in November. I'm doing the first ever Women in Tech week. There's never been a week devoted to women in tech. It will happen between the 7th and the 11th of October, which is coincides with Ada Lovelace Day.
And where is it?
It's everywhere. That's the
Oh,
beauty.
fabulous.
So basically, it's going to go across the UK. I've asked all of my clients and my partners and anyone else that will listen to me, will you host an event for your women in tech? So that's retention of their women. And will you open up spaces for external women to attend? So there's some attraction in there as well. So we've got events running in Isle of Man, in Newcastle, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, London. They're virtual events, and the best thing, they're all free. So we've even got lesson plans being Teach Your Kids Tech of an evening with Tech She Can, which is a wonderful charity. So there'll be a whole myriad. It's the first year. I'm hoping to grow it year on year. The first ever Women in Tech week, a nationwide week, so that we can get more women into tech and to see them progress.
Great stuff. And what do you dare our audience to do? So D.A.R.E, everyone knows it's dare to dream bigger. The A is the action, the R is the resilience, the E is the energy. But the last question I ask all the D.A.R.E podcast guests is, what do you dare our audience to do?
It depends who they are.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Obviously, I would say to everyone, I mean, it goes without saying, right, be kind in all that you do and look for ways that you can give back to others. None of us got where we've got to by accident, whether it was a sponsor, somebody that took us under our wing, gave us that opportunity. So I think we've all got an obligation to pay that forward in some way. So what I would say to everyone who's listening is to look around you and think, who could do with a bit of hand where I'm standing from with my experience? Who could I pull up? Who could I give exposure to? Who might be struggling a little bit? So absolutely pay it forward.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for being
for
a guest
me.
on the D.A.R.E podcast.
It's been awesome. Thank you, Miranda.
Powered by Citoyenne. Thank you. And you've been watching the D.A.R.E podcast. I'm the host and producer, Miranda Brawn. This has been a wonderful episode. I can't wait for you to share, subscribe, follow. And for those who might be thinking, I could appear on the D.A.R.E podcast, I'd like to be a guest, or maybe you know someone that would like to be a guest on the D.A.R.E podcast, or maybe you'd like to sponsor an episode, feel free to email us at thedarepodcast@gmail.com, and you can follow us on all the usual podcast platforms, and you can watch this episode on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.